Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Gibby reps NJ. They're the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? Is real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, for the second day in a row, we are live. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, Till Mets Do Us Part on YouTube, on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. Of course, you guys know I'm out in Los Angeles, California. Matt Ibanez holding things down back in New Jersey. We're coming to you guys with a special episode because the news, well, you all know it by now. Pete Alonso is back with our New York Mets. So it wouldn't be a show if I didn't start off by asking you how you feeling, but this is just a general how you feeling, because we're going to get into everything surrounding this Pete Alonso return to our New York Mets. But did you get bad weather out there in New Jersey?
Well, we had a borderline like ice storm this morning.
That's cool.
Travel, yeah, of course, always a good thing going out there. It's blistering cold and sleet and rain. It's cold, it's freezing, ice everywhere, slippery. But for the most part, it wasn't too bad of a commute this morning. So getting to work wasn't that bad, but we did have a delayed opening. So things were kind of pushed back, which means I became a speed teacher basically today because I only had the kids for like 36 minutes. So it was a bit of a nightmare in terms of that. But other than all of that nonsense, nobody wants to hear that. We're here to talk about our Mets. A lot went on last night that we will cover. I will save some of my thoughts in general, but it's Thursday. It's later. The red light's on. We're closing down 100 people almost here already. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can join the conversation. As John said before on X, Twitter, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts on this entire ordeal. With all that being said, let's have some fun. Let's have a show.
Well, you know, like you said, it's later because normally we are live every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, of course, here on a Thursday, getting our schedules together so that you and I could talk about Pete Alonso returning to the Mets on a Thursday at 8 p.m. out on the East Coast, where it is dark and it is freezing rain and it is all kinds of stuff. But you know what, Ibby? I can't even rub in the weather because it has been raining here for the last several days in Southern California. We don't get it often, but this is the rainy season, and I will say that we have needed it. So it is nice to have a little bit of rain here in Southern California. And if you can humor me, Ibby, for just a second.
Sure.
I'm just going to stand up so that people can see what we're wearing. We got that Alonso jersey on right there. That was an awkward stand-up. I didn't think I was going to be able to turn around. I'm on my couch. It's all tricky in the office. But anyway, I'm rocking the Pete Alonso Mets jersey because I am thrilled that Pete Alonso is back. So we got a lot of things we want to talk about. We want to hear from everybody. Shout out to Shay and Andre and Armand and Carlos and David Burnett. I don't want to miss anybody. So many folks in the live chat. Dan, Ariel, we got Maureen in the house. Brad is here as well. Stanley Babbage. I'm sure these numbers are going to continue to climb. We want to hear from all of you. First thing on the agenda is, John becoming a model now. Yeah, that was not my best move. It was not my best move. I realized as I started to stand up, the way my desk is set up and in the office here for the podcast, it doesn't lend itself for me turning around. I was going to knock like everything off of my desk, including the computer and my water. And I was like, that's probably not a great way to start things out. Anyway, we want to start things out. I'm going to ask Ibby, but I ask everything. I ask all these questions to the chat as well. Ibby, it's last night. I guess it's kind of around this time, maybe a little bit later.
Yep.
Your initial reaction when you see it on Twitter.
I finally had gotten all my stuff ready for the next day. I finally get into bed. I sit down, phone lights up. I look over, Jeff Passan. I see it. I'm like, all right, what random signing is this now? I got to hear about, Yohan Moncada. That was just before, but like, I got to look at something weird. Like, who is it? Like, I don't care. And then I see it's like breaking news. The New York Mets have come to an agreement with, star first baseman Pete Alonso. And my initial reaction was, thank you, Jesus. We don't have to do this anymore. Like, I was so thrilled. Well, that was my initial thought. And then I'm like, we just got done recording, and this couldn't have happened a few hours earlier. But
of course.
But shout out to whoever said this. I can't remember who said it on Twitter, but they were like, everyone calls him Sleepy Stearns, but all these big news breaks always happen at night to prove that he's not that sleepy, because clearly he stays up late and he's getting work done. But look, when it comes down to it, I was relieved in general, because we all got, we were all reaching our wits' end with this entire situation. We had just recorded a show talking about how we were just tired and there was nothing else to talk about. And I even mentioned that, we want to talk about other things and look forward, but it was like a black cloud. Like, there was nothing that was going to stop us from continuously reverting back to that conversation. I am just thrilled, and we'll talk more details in a moment once we get your initial thoughts too. But I'm just thrilled that it's done with. It's here. It makes sense. And we can finally start looking at what this team can do from an offensive standpoint, how that offense can protect the pitching in a sense, and how we can go about, winning some ball games this year. And, if that 89 win, 91 win idea for this team is proper, and if it can even go beyond.
Numbers should go up. I mean, just based on those were the numbers that whatever ranking system you want to go to, those were the numbers that people had them at prior. So I think when you add a potential 40 home run bat, potential 100 RBI bat, your numbers are going to go up. Now, I don't think Pete Alonso is worth, 8 wins. He's not Juan Soto, but I think he's worth a couple wins. So I think you're going to see those numbers and those projections go up across the board. I was, like a lot of you guys, I'm sure, and like Ibby kind of just said, I was relieved. Now, I saw it about 45 minutes late because we got done. I got wrapped up, kind of downloading the episode, getting ready to post the audio version of our regular show. My girlfriend got home. We sat down for dinner. Obviously, we're 3 hours behind here on the West Coast. Left my phone, left everything in the office here in the podcast studio. Didn't even think about it, because I was like, look, I'm tired of getting burned. I opened up the show yesterday saying every morning I wake up and I look for a text from Ibby saying, hey, we got Pete back. I look for the alerts on Twitter saying the Mets got Pete. And I didn't get them. So I was like, you know what? I'm out on this. I don't care. I'm not going to take my phone with me into the kitchen and have the phone set up for dinner, because I just didn't think it was going to happen. Or rather, there's no inclination that it was going to happen when it did. But it was relief. It was an exhale that it finally happened. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back here without jumping the gun, because Ibby, yesterday I did say that the Mets should put a deadline on this, and it doesn't seem that the Mets did put a deadline on it, but I said that they should have given Pete 1 or 2 options to choose from, and I was not right exactly with regards to the years and the numbers and stuff, but the Mets did give Pete 2 options to choose from, which is basically like, hey man, you pick. There's good and bad to both of these deals, but you go ahead and choose one. So I'll give myself a little bit of a pat on the back there for telegraphing that just a bit. But yeah, man, I was just relieved. I don't want anything to be misconstrued over the last several weeks and last 2 months or whatever. How much I like Pete as a player. He's a flawed player, but I think he's an important player. We started off, mid-season talking about how, I was like, look, I would give Pete Alonso X deal, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years in the right market. I was advocating for the Mets to pay up to keep him. I saw the importance of it. But then the offseason rolls around and everything turns. The market was never there. And so then it's not that my feelings on Pete changed. It's just my feelings on the situation changed. And that's what you started to see. And I think that's the part that a lot of Mets fans lost sight of throughout this process was like, oh man, you're down on Pete. It's like, no, I'm not down on Pete. Well, some people are, but no rational Met fan is down on Pete. They're just understanding that the market dictates what a player is worth, and Pete Alonso ain't got no market. So there was no reason for the Mets to ever push against themselves and negotiate against themselves to get themselves, a player back that they, I think, wanted, but I don't think they would have, desperately missed. So let's talk about the particulars of the deal here. It winds up being 2 years, $54 million, but there are some caveats to it. There is an opt-out after the first year. He will also get an imbalanced deal in terms of the fact that the first year, upcoming year, 2025, $30 million in AAV. The second year, if he decides to opt in, $24 million in AAV. So a little bit of a pay cut as far as that's concerned. He also gets a $10 million signing bonus in the deal. There is zero deferred money, and it does bring the average annual value, if you take that 30 and that 24, it averages out to $27 million over the 2 years. And that is where the Mets luxury tax hit is going to go. It's going to go to that average annual value number, which is on the $27 million. I think all in all, a good deal for both sides. Obviously, this is a Stearns masterclass, Ibby, but I think it's a good deal for Pete in a couple of different ways. So your thoughts on when you saw the deal, where was your surprise at? Where was your thought? Did you think, oh man, they were going to have to go longer? Were you not surprised that it was the deal that they actually signed?
I was a little bit shocked that Boris really, I could say, like, bent the knee in a sense, but of course he can say, well, I got my client. He's the highest paid first baseman in the game for 2025 coming off of his worst year. That's a win for me. Well, is it really based off of what had happened this entire time and the money that he turned down to go to you? In the end, a lot of people are going to say, well, you kind of missed out on $100 million, and that's a big chunk of change. But when I saw it, I was more shocked that the total, even on the 2 years, wasn't a little bit higher. I thought that he probably would have pushed for the offers that were out there. But I also said yesterday that, during those, those deals being pulled, once those come off the table, they don't have to go back on because of everything that's transpired. They can say, look, the market's even gotten smaller for you because the offers we had out for you were still better than what the other teams were giving to you, that being the Blue Jays, if they were truly in. So the Mets had all the power. It didn't matter. So when I saw the number, I was a little bit taken aback because of what we have grown to know as Scott Boras. But when I saw everything in totality, I was very happy as a fan because I feel like everyone gets what they want. Pete gets an opportunity to try and cash in again. He gets to go back out next year. He gets to make $30 million here. He gets to try to do it while just being what he's supposed to be, a power bat in a lineup with Soto, the entire thing. So I think that all parties involved, it was extremely tedious. It was annoying. It just dragged on and it sucked. The entire thing was just awful. But we finally got to the end. We're like Andy Dufresne coming out of the shit in Shawshank. Like, we're just so ecstatic that we're finally out of it. And I think all parties in the end can be happy. Is Pete probably upset that he doesn't get the long-term deal right now? Probably. But once again, you had one. You don't get it. You don't usually get two shots at something. He gets another shot here to not only get $30 million, but he can try to go out and go the route of previous Scott Boras clients that actually did well by doing this plan. That being the likes of Blake Snell and Matt Chapman. So really, he's looking at what Matt Chapman did, and he hopes that he can replicate it, and he doesn't go the way of Bellinger or Jordan Montgomery. He has a fallback of making $24 million if things go south next year that he can do. But if all things considered, and I've been saying this, I think ultimately this is a 1-year deal. Yeah, I really do think that this is going to end up being the swan song of Pete Alonso.
The only way this isn't a 1-year deal is if Pete does not have a great year. And I think that's the thing. That's the protection in this that is good for Pete. Obviously, this is a great get for the Mets on their terms. Stearns played this masterfully. He played Scott Boras, and the Mets got everything they wanted out of Pete Alonso, which is they acknowledged that they needed to have him in 2025 and maybe for a couple of years after that, but they did not want to commit long-term to the player. So to make this sound like the Mets didn't win out, I'm not going to go there, because obviously this deal is very friendly to the Mets. But there's a couple ways this is friendly to Pete Alonso. First of all, the Mets caved financially in a way that I suggested they do a couple different times. And a lot of people have suggested it. We're like, look, if the Mets want to get this deal done, they're going to have to eventually bend a little bit with regards to what Pete is asking for, either in money or an extra year or some combination of the two, to make this a deal that Pete can agree to, where he doesn't look embarrassed, where he doesn't look like he played himself. Because that might not be important to me. It might not be important to you. It is important to players. It is important to agents, and that is a factor. But Pete now gets $30 million in AAV this year. That makes him the highest paid first baseman in terms of AAV of all time. Now, there's a little caveat to that, because Miguel Cabrera's deal was technically a bit higher. I think it was 31 and a half or 31, whatever. But he technically signed that deal as a third baseman and then moved to first base that following year. So he never really played that contract as a third baseman. So Pete Alonso becomes the highest paid first baseman in terms of AAV, in terms of one single shot deal in the history of baseball. I think that was important to him. But the opt-out here, allowing him to control his destiny, if you will, is important, because a lot of people said that after turning down the contract extension a year and a half ago that Billy Epler put in front of him, that Pete started to press. They thought he pressed a little bit last year, and they thought that he pressed this year, especially in a walk year. Well, now you give Pete control of his walk year. His walk year is either going to be this year where he gets to hit in a lineup with Lindor and Soto, and yes, other people in the lineup as well, Vientos, Nimmo, I'm not forgetting about them. We're talking about two great players in Lindor and Soto. He gets to hit with them, and he gets to do it pressure-free, because he knows if it doesn't quite go his way, he can just re-up and he can have another crack at it. And Ibby, a lot of people are going to say, and I know you talked about this with Aunt Rivera on Subway to Shea last night when he did his emergency podcast, and you and I echoed this sentiment. You know, if he comes out as a free agent next year, when you've got the Japanese first baseman, you've got Vladimir Guerrero potentially both being first baseman, that might hurt Pete's market. I disagree. I think that that's going to help Pete's market as long as Pete does what Pete is capable of doing. If Pete has a 40 home run, 100 RBI year, there are going to be teams around the league that look at Vlad Guerrero Jr. and say, yeah, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is better than Pete Alonso, but you know what? He's probably going to get a 10-year deal. They're going to look at, what's his name? Murakami, I believe it is.
Murakami, yes.
Murakami, yeah.
Yes.
They're going to look at Murakami and they're going to say, yeah, he's a little bit of a wild card, a little bit of a lottery ticket, because we're not 100% sure what he can offer, but he's another player who's going to be in his mid-20s, and they're going to say, you know what? These guys might be expensive. You might be able to get Pete on half the amount of money that you have to spend on Vladimir Guerrero, maybe less than half the amount of money. What if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. signs a $400 million contract? If Pete comes out and he hits 40 home runs and he knocks in 100 runs and the Mets are a successful franchise and he opts out, a team around the league might go, you know what? I'll give Pete Alonso 5 years, 110, because it's not paying $400 million. So I think Pete has the opportunity to recoup money here, because you're going to let the guys like Murakami and you're going to let the guys like especially Vladimir Guerrero set the market. But Pete just has to be Pete. And I think he's in the perfect place now to do this. He's back at a place where he feels comfortable. He's back in a clubhouse where he is liked. He is back with an ownership and a management and a front office where he is liked, in a franchise where he is liked. The fan base likes him, and he doesn't have to be too much. He doesn't have to pretend to be Aaron Judge. Nobody has to speculate that he's, a better player than he is. He just needs to be the guy who is a right-handed power bat that hits behind Juan Soto. So I think he's in a really good spot when everything is all said and done. I know on the surface it looks like he gave up a fuck ton of money, and he did. He did. But he can still, I think, shout out to Ryan Finkelstein, Locked on Mets. He said this in his show this morning. He thinks there's an avenue where Pete can make up that money. If you look at the 20-something million he made this past year on the last year of his deal with the Mets, the $30 million he's now made, in this coming year. If he cashes out to, $100 and something million, he's going to recoup almost everything of what he gave up when he turned down that 7-year deal, that 6-year extension. So, you know what? I think, look, it's not ideal for Pete. I admit that, but I don't think it's bad for Pete. He just has to now go and do what we all think he's capable of doing.
Absolutely. And I think to the point you're making before with him going out amongst the likes of whether it's Murakami, if he gets a huge deal, and obviously going up against Vlad, depending on what he does this season, I think it's possible for him to get a deal similar to what Santander got this year. And I think that going into this year, Pete probably wanted more than that. But going into next year, having made $30 million this year, that kind of brings down the overall market next year in terms of his ask potentially, where he could say, he might settle for, 100 million. So then in total, it's 130. And, so he kind of gets what he wanted in the end, potentially. Now, I got to bring this stuff up because, usually we don't do this looking over at the chat, but I do see some people yelling over in the chat on certain things, and some things did get started off, and we'll get to them eventually. But there is one I want to bring up first, and it's not the one who's constantly screaming right now in all caps. It's a different one. I want to bring up this one first, and it's something that really bothers me because I think it is extremely misplaced and
it's short-sighted. I know which one you're going to bring up,
and very short-sighted.
Yeah,
is it this one?
Yes, it is. You got to give Cohen credit for getting us Soto. If it was up to Stearns, we would still be waiting.
And then following up.
Yeah, Cohen got us Soto and Pete.
It's bullshit, is what it
unfair.
is. In short,
it's unfair
and it's wrong because I hate the fact that we all want someone and then you always want to place blame. And then when something happens, it's only because of the owner. You have to understand something. Number one, when it comes to a player like Soto, forget that, not even Soto, when it comes to a contract that gets up into the 400, 500, 600, that goes beyond a president of baseball ops. That goes beyond a general manager. They're a part of the process because they want a given player. But ultimately, yes, it's about, are you comfortable with giving out said money? That person wants to be a part of that process because they want to see, what am I investing this money? This is a lot of money. My president of baseball ops, who I put all the faith in the world in, is coming to me and saying that he wants said player. I want to see if this player is worth my money as well. So it's a collaborative thing, like it always is in any organization. So the fact that people want to sit there and say David Stearns does nothing is a crock of shit, because it's not. He brings an attitude and a focus from a smaller market team that is needed, because when you can do these types of things, but have the money behind you and have a slow heartbeat and allow yourself to wait things out because you can pounce on anything at any given moment, that's called being smart. It is. Yeah. And
I forgot where
and then I'm going to follow up with something else, but you can go right now.
I forgot where I saw this. Somebody tweeted this. They said, "Oh, you know what? It might have been Gelbs that David Stearns brings small market savvy to Cohen's big time wallet." And look, guys, I have been a Pete Alonso advocate. If you've listened to this show for the past 4.5 years, you know that. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that. I have said things about Pete. I opened this show saying last season, during the season, I said, look, man, if you got to go to 7 years instead of 5 to get it done, I think you have to do it because there's an importance here. I said that the Mets offseason started with the addition of Juan Soto, which I thought was the most important thing. This was before they ever signed him. And I said then they needed still to bring back Pete Alonso because they need a longer lineup. You look at the teams they're competing with in the National League, and they have incredibly deep lineups. Atlanta, the Dodgers, Philadelphia. I know Philadelphia taking a little bit of a downturn. Some of these guys get, a little bit older or whatever the case may be. They're still a team that's going to spend money, and they're still a team that has a very deep lineup as it stands right now. So these are all things I said. So I don't want to hear it from anybody that we're just like everybody else. I don't want to hear it from anybody that, oh, well, you know what? Stearns had nothing to do with this. No, you have to execute these deals in a smart, team-building, forward-thinking manner. And that's what Stearns did here. Yes, of course the credit goes to the owner. The owner has to write the check. And when you look to other teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Miami Marlins and pick whatever team you want to pick out of a hat, if those owners say, no, we can't have that player, then guess what? It doesn't matter how good your GM is or your president of baseball operations is. You ain't going to get that player. So Steve Cohen deserves credit. But to take credit away from David Stearns, especially on the way he played this Alonso deal, you're a fool.
Yes.
You're an absolute fool. You're the same kind of fucking clown who booed David Stearns at Amazing Day. You go to a fan fest, there's a GM and an owner and a manager and all this amazing stuff happening for a team that just came off of an NLCS with the GM that everybody in Mets fandom wanted, cried for, clamored for, begged for. A guy who is universally regarded as one of the brightest, if not the brightest, baseball man in the game right now. And you're going to boo him? And now you're not going to give him credit after his plan fucking worked? It worked. So at least have a little bit of decency, at least have a little bit of courage, at least have a little bit of guts to admit that you were wrong. You booed this guy. Oh, we want Pete. We want Pete. We want to get this guy back. We want to get this guy back. Oh, well, you know what? You got him back. You got him back. And you got him back on a deal that makes so much sense for the team. I'm wearing a Pete Alonso jersey, but the more important part than the Alonso part is the Mets part. I want the Mets to win a World Series. Yes. If Pete Alonso's on the team, that's great. If he's not, guess what, guys? I don't give a fuck.
Yes. And I want to give a shout out to TJ, who's usually in our chat. He's a friend of mine, not here lately, but we were talking this morning, and he sent me this. And it echoes what I was talking about yesterday with frustration with people when it comes to Stearns and really the Mets offseason as a whole. And this was before Alonso. But when you throw Alonso on, of course, it makes it look even better. But when you actually write things down, when you write it down and you look at it and then you say it out loud, you realize the offseason that the Mets have had. Let's take a look at it real quick for those that want to rip on David Stearns for a moment.
Go ahead.
We look at the added or retained area for the Mets this offseason. That includes Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Sean Manaea, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, Jesse Winker, AJ Minter, Ryan Stanek, Jose Siri, Nick Madrigal. They lost Luis Severino, DJ Stewart, Harrison Bader, and to be determined, of course, on the likes of Jose Quintana, since they're not signed yet, Jose Iglesias, Phil Maton, Adam Ottavino, and JD Martinez. When you look at it like that, I'd say that David Stearns has done a damn good job of turning this roster over for the better. So please.
And he did it.
Put a sock in it.
And he did it. Enough. He did it for the second year in a row. He put this roster together on the fly. He did it for the second year in a row because the people who were in charge before him, because of the revolving door of GMs, because Cohen was smart enough to not elevate any of these people to president of baseball operations because he was trying desperately to save that job for David Stearns because it was the right thing to do. Not the right thing to do by David Stearns because he was a Mets fan too. It was the right thing to do for this franchise. David Stearns had to rebuild the team on the fly last year. He did, and everybody gave him shit for it. Oh, how come they're not in on this guy? How come they're not in on that guy? Sean Manaea, we'll see. Luis Severino, 6.65 ERA, we'll see. Team was 2 wins away from the World Series. Oh, he didn't build a good enough bullpen at the start of the season. He didn't. You know what he did then? He rebuilt the bullpen on the fly at the trading deadline and acquired like 5 players. And all of those players, with the exception of maybe Huascar Brazaban, paid huge dividends. Phil Maton was great after they got him. He was bad in September. He was bad in the playoffs. Ryan Stanek wasn't really great when they got him, but then he was absolute nails in the playoffs. Second best reliever on the team. So you're going to give this guy credit or not? It's such a ridiculous concept to sit here and not want to give this guy credit. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So I don't even want to address it any further. Ibby, you rattled off that list of guys that the Mets either retained or brought in.
Yeah.
Here's where Cohen deserves credit. If you total all of those contracts that the Mets signed for this year, it totals $1 billion.
Thank you, Steve.
That's where Cohen deserves the credit.
Yeah.
That's where, and I'm not saying that that's nothing. That's fucking great. Could you imagine if you grew up watching the Wilpons? Could you imagine this? $1 billion spent in an offseason? Jesus.
We were told that we couldn't have two $30 million players on our roster.
Now we got three.
One's making 50, two others making 30.
Yeah. And then there's a myriad guys who are making 20, added to that. Right. And then like guys who are in the upper teens, millions of dollars. Like, so Steve Cohen deserves credit, but put some credit where Stearns is concerned as well. So I honestly, it's funny. I wanted this to be a celebratory show, and I didn't want to go off the way that I did, but I do find it. I find it disrespectful to Stearns, and I find some of this stuff disrespectful to us. Quite frankly, I don't want to be I don't want to be this guy, and I don't want to take up the air doing this, but like this comment, like honestly, you guys are influenced by the stupid lying propaganda media to make you turn on Pete and everything that he's done for this franchise over the last 6 years.
We didn't turn on the guy.
Never. You guys are just like every other podcast, every other Mets podcast that ran with the same crap. Okay. And then it's like, but you guys, all you do on podcasts.
No.
Thanks for the comments. Thanks for subscribing.
We ripped on the guy for his stupidity because in the end, this was all at the fault of Pete. He fired his agent and he wanted more money and it didn't work. It backfired. That happens sometimes. Yeah. You call someone out and that's the case. And I had said previously in our group chat amongst Mets content creators, I said it the other day. I said, if there's one thing I said, if this guy comes back, which he did, the last thing I wanted to hear was how much he wanted to be a Met and how much he loves New York. And we started to hear some of it today already. And I was like, I don't want to hear it. I want you to come back and I want you to play ball and I want you to hit. That's what I want, because if you loved it, you would have took the 158. If you loved it, you would have took the 90. You wouldn't settle for a 1 year and then an opt-out. So it's not like the Mets didn't show the guy respect, because they did. Carson's comment, 27 million AAV in total, 30 million in total cash for 2025, 24 million option for 26, highest AAV among first basemen for 2025, third highest AAV among first basemen for 2026. If he exercises it, everyone can shut up now and Martino can go weep. And it's the truth. They did not treat him bad.
No.
They gave him everything. He just kept on saying no. And that was it.
Before we head into the break, last thing we'll say on this particular portion of the contract. It doesn't matter. Here's another. You want to give Cohen credit? I'll give Cohen credit for this too. Because no matter who has been the GM, and to this point, he's had so many, because the first couple of years did not go his way with regards to the Jared Porters and the Zach Scotts and Sandy Alderson coming back and then Billy Epler. Cohen has set this precedent that has carried through all of these GMs, president of baseball ops, in the case of David Stearns. Where the plan for the Mets is, if you're an internal free agent, go out, shop yourself, get your deal, then come back to us, and we will let you know if we're going to beat that deal. They did it with Jacob deGrom. The Mets decided to not match that deal. So far, seems like it was the right move. Also, I think deGrom really wanted to be out of here. I was wrong about that. I thought he wanted to stay, but I think it's clear he wanted to go. But they did it, Ibby, with Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo got his nice lucrative contract offer from the Colorado Rockies. He came back to the Mets. The Mets met it or matched it or sweetened the pot or whatever, and Brandon Nimmo's a Met for life. They did it with Sean Manaea. They said, Sean, go out and get a deal. Sean Manaea came back. with the deal from the Oakland A's. It was very clear he didn't want to go back to the Oakland A's, the deal that Severino eventually took. He came back. It seems as though that was the best deal he got. And the Mets said, you know what? You were really good for us last year. We think you can repeat it. How about if we give you a couple $1 million more, you sign the deal right now? And he did. With Pete Alonso, I am very confident, Ibby. Now, look, I don't know if this was going to go the way of Nimmo or if it was going to go the way of DeGrom. I'm not sure that the Mets were going to match whatever offer Alonso got. But I think they were willing to match a certain kind of deal. It's very clear that they wanted him back in some way, shape, or form. But that market never materialized. And you know how you know that market never materialized? Scott Boras, agent extraordinaire, the best agent in the history of Major League Baseball, the guy who gets everybody well over market value. He brought the Mets an exclusive deal that only the Mets were allowed to have, that no one else was being offered. It's because no one else wanted Pete Alonso, and no one else was going to give him that deal. That's why Scott Boras offered the Mets an exclusive opportunity that he painted as, oh, you better sign this, a golden opportunity. We're coming to you and you only. No, he was trying to get them to negotiate against themselves. Anybody with a brain can see that. It's crazy. But I do give Cohen credit for being the guy who says, go test your market, come back to us, and we'll talk. That's when you have more money than anybody else, Ibby, that's a very good way to negotiate.
Of course it is. And look, I think Ant Subway to Shea, our man, says it best here. Why does all this even matter right now? He's back. It's time to move on to spring training, full speed ahead, which is what we're going to do in the second half of this show, because some of this stuff had to be said. Shout out to the 316 people that are here right now. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. I see that we got about 37 on the YouTube side, 28 likes. Make sure if you haven't already to smash that like. And if you want to join the conversation, which has been very lively to this point, if you want to join that conversation, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're still 4 subs away. We've hit this lull when it comes to subs, 4 subs away from 1250. If you want to join the conversation, have your voice be heard on the show, make sure you sub so we can see you over in the chat and you can join us in this entire Pete debate, and of course what's to come for our New York Mets as we are full steam ahead to spring training.
I think this is it's a funny handle, but I also think this is a good comment. This is Diddy Baby Oil saying the deal worked out for everyone, and I think that's something that you have to understand. Again, Pete did wind up leaving a lot of money on the table. He did sort of kind of play himself with the way he handled it, but it did work out for everybody, at least for now. And Pete just all Pete has to do is play baseball like the way we know he can. And then it will work out in spades for everybody.
Go hit homers, man. That's it.
Anyway, this is John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We're going to take a quick 30-second break to reset the conversation. Also throw in some ads for the audio version of this show. Do not go anywhere. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back with Till Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week, usually coming to you guys live on Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We did that yesterday. We're back again on a Thursday, started at 8:05 p.m. here today. Ibby and I got our schedules together so that we could do a special Pete Alonso returns to the Mets episode. And so far, you're right, it has been lively, or as some people say, we're being dressed down from the pulpit. If that's how you feel, sorry, but that's how it goes sometimes. Anyway, there's a lot more to get into, Ibby. Before we do, let's hit them with a quick word from our friends over at Independent Safes. Can't forget to show them some love here on this special episode.
Absolutely. Even an emergency podcast, we still shout out our friends over at IndependenceSafes.com. Independent Safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes. Fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependenceSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And I'll take the first half of that show for the most part, put it in that safe because we're done with it. We're moving forward. Look, some things had to be said because I think there's been a lot of pent up stuff when it comes to this entire thing, and things just had to get out. And it's done. It's proper. It's finished. We're ready to move forward because look, there are things to be excited about.
There are
New York Mets because this lineup, is a lot more complete. I mentioned yesterday, I'm not backing down from what I said, that I was fine if Pete didn't come back and they were going to go with what they had, based off of the numbers that I had seen, the projections. I thought this team would still be one of the top tier teams in the NL. But I also said I'm not going to say no to Pete. Now Pete's back, and now we have a very top heavy lineup, which I like, which also allows others to slide down a little bit, relax a little bit more, and they can go and do their thing and hopefully reach their potential 90th percentile when it comes to overall production. But it's going to be fun to talk about lineup constructions and things of that nature, because that's going to be the next thing that everyone screams about, which we don't like doing on this show, which is lineups every day, but it is something that we can hit on.
The one thing I do want to talk about, to just put a wrap on the first half of the show and kind of segue here into the second half of the show, we kept talking about how it was good for the Mets, and obviously the short-term deal makes it good for the Mets with regards to Pete. But Ibby, I think it also makes it good for the Mets a couple other ways. Whether or not Pete opts in or opts out, it does not take the Mets out of play for a few different things. They can, if they want, they can negotiate with Pete now during the season. I don't think that's going to be particularly likely, but you could see a situation maybe where the Matt Chapman type extension happens like he got in San Francisco. Again, I don't think it's likely, but I do think it puts it back on the table. That's a way they could go if they so choose. It also doesn't take them out, again, whether Pete opts out after the season or not, of the free agent first baseman market. So if they truly do want to investigate Vlad Guerrero Jr., they can. Even if Pete is still on the team, they can decide to do that. If they want to investigate what it would take to get Murakami in here, they can do that. If they want to not spend money on a first baseman and go in a different direction and, trade for, again, I don't know. I'm not saying that I want these things or I think these things are super likely, but if they wanted to trade for Manny Machado, because who the hell knows what's going on in San Diego, and if they wanted to trade for Fernando Tatis Jr., because who the hell knows what's going on there, and absorb another contract and move things around, they can, because they are not tied long term. And David Stearns has said that he would like to play in every aspect of the free agent market every single year. And the way you do that is maintaining the flexibility. Yes, sometimes you sign a deal you got to sign, like Juan Soto. How important, franchise altering. And it's not to discredit what Pete has done for this franchise, but he's not the same player, so you can't treat him the same way. And so I think it's important to see the way that they have navigated this scenario, because it leaves all things open. And again, before people jump down my throat about saying Machado or Tatis, I'm just saying the Mets can now, Ibby, do whatever they want. And that includes, I'm not taking Pete out of the conversation. It includes him re-ing up, opting in. It includes him being extended. I don't think that's likely, but I also don't think Fernando Tatis Jr. is likely either. But it just allows the Mets to do whatever they want now. And that should be a thing that gets everybody excited.
Absolutely. And again, when you want to have flexibility, and that's what this is always about. You want to be able, as you've said before, he treats the season, he treats the roster like a living document. It's always ever changing. You never know when something's going to fall into your lap. You have the opportunity to strike. There's a lot of options for this team moving forward. There are areas that fans think that they could improve still, areas that they're going to obviously monitor as the season starts, because honestly, I think right now, I know people still have ideas of grandeur that there could be other things in the pipeline before we even get to spring training. I'm not so sure about that. I think that this is pretty much what you're going to get, minus a couple of smaller end things. But there's definitely still opportunity, because improvement, as we've learned from David Stearns, is is something that can happen at any point during the season. So if something does become available, I wouldn't be shocked to see the Mets strike, regardless of price tag, especially if they are pushing for something even greater than what they thought they might be. So there's a lot there to like, and I agree with you that any name at any price tag is definitely attainable. Look, there's a lot going on when it comes to San Diego right now, and I don't want to make it seem like they're just going to give guys away. You're still going to have to pay a price.
Yeah, they might.
You never know. But we did talk about that yesterday.
I think Preller he's crazy. He's a wild card, but I do think he's too smart to give guys away. But of course, today is his name Jerry Seidler? I forgot his first name. Starts with a J. Peter Seidler's brother. The late Peter Seidler's brother was unanimously voted by the MLB owners to be the control person. And he's the guy who seems more likely to want to sell off pieces and save money than Peter Seidler's wife and kids would have been. And so now that he's been put in control, again, I don't think he's going to overstep and supersede and dump on Preller and tell Preller what to do. But I do think, Ibby, I think you're right. I think this is the team that the Mets go to war with to start the season. But like Zero Cool brings up, like a lot of other people have brought up in the comments so far, cease Machado talk. Leave Machado out of it for a second. I think you can revisit conceptually. I think you can revisit conceptually cease Michael King talk, because I think, especially Cease, I think now with the ownership thing being resolved and being resolved unfavorably for Padres fans, favorably for everybody else potentially, I could see a situation where Cease is dealt. Cease is not going to be on this team next year. They have too much money invested in bad contracts. He's a Boris client. He's not going to sign an extension, obviously. It's not likely that they're going to pony up to pay him anyway. And the way this coincides with Preller is known, I said it yesterday, for getting everything he can out of players until their walk year and then trading them. He just did it with Juan Soto when he traded Soto to the Yankees once he realized that he wasn't going to be able to keep him. So I think there was always a backdoor way for the Mets to get back involved with Cease. I think now that the control person has been named and the ownership thing is resolved, I wouldn't say it's likely, I just think it's possible, because also, to the point here of Paul Revere, the Mets will make a couple of trades this year, guaranteed. Too many guys are blocked. Right now, they even have some issues with a 40-man roster crunch. They have guys who are out of options. They have guys who need to be on the 26, guys who could also benefit the San Diego Padres, who are in this weird transition. We talked about some of them yesterday. So again, I'm not saying it's likely, but I do think it's there. I think there's a chance the Mets might not be done as far as adding a starting pitcher. I'd love it to be King or Cease. King is a little bit more attractive to me because some of the other behind the scenes stuff, he's not a Boris guy and stuff like that. But I'm not going to be mad if it's Dylan Cease.
No, not at all. And of course, like with the way this team operates and, the opportunity that is definitely in front of them after bringing Pete back, you could always say that the door is left open a crack, if you will. But I think it would also have to be something that sends back some money as well to kind of even things out, if that's the way you can get rid of Marte. But again, a lot of people think that Marte's staying because of the friendship with Soto. So I'm not sure on that. But either way, look, if you have an opportunity to strike on a player, I said it yesterday, I'll repeat it now. I think if the Mets were to go after a Dylan Cease, their best opportunity is to do it right now. Not because of the 1 year, but because this is where they're asking for the quantity. Once we get to the deadline, quality of player is what's going to win out, which is where they can eventually lose getting a player of that ilk, because all it's going to take is one or two teams that need a pitcher that have a stronger farm system, that has flush with more talent, that's going to be able to trump the Mets when it comes to an offer. They'll choose the quality at that point. They'll take the best player at that point, not so much if you're going to offer us three guys. They're going to say, no, we're going to take the best guy and go from there. So if they're going to do it, I would say now's your chance. If they pass, I think you're looking at a different type of pitcher come the deadline.
I agree with that, because you also are going to get other teams in the mix at the deadline, because, the old adage for baseball teams at the deadline is you have to reward the clubhouse for playing a certain way, right? So let's say a team like the Red Sox, who are kind of slowly and methodically building back to, some semblance of respectability after tearing down that franchise in a very odd way. But, they go out and they make the big deal for Garrett Crochet. They have some really exciting young talent on that team. Who knows if the Baltimore Orioles take a step back with some of the crazy things they've done this offseason? Who knows if the Blue Jays are ever going to live up to that? We're not sure. Tampa Bay, they're there, then they're not, then they're there, then they're not, whatever. And the Yankees are the Yankees. But if you find yourself in a position, you're the Red Sox or even the Baltimore Orioles, let's say, where you're in June and July and you need an ace and Dylan Cease is still out there, there's no question that the Red Sox can propose a better package to San Diego, to your point, than the Mets could for a guy like Dylan Cease or Michael King or whatever the case may be. Now, you are taking the chance that maybe the Padres at that point are just in it and they don't want to trade that guy. That's another factor, where right now you can alleviate some of the financial burden for them while also giving them back players who can slot onto their roster right here, right now, as they're in this odd transition. And thank you, Andre, saying that San Diego is a complete mess. John Seidler. I don't know how I didn't just guess that, because my name also John, but I for some reason I had Jerry on the brain. It is what it is. Ibby, look, there's a lot of different ways we can go. Carson just saying flexibility to what I was saying before about the Mets being able to kind of live in whatever area of the free agent market that they want to. And it is super important, whether it's free agents or trades, for them to be in that position. Andre also saying rather have King than Cease. Cease is another Boris guy, enough with dealing with Boris. Look, if you're a big market team, you're a big boy franchise, you're going to have to deal with Boris until he dies or retires. He seems like the kind of guy.
It's always going to be that. And I'm going to bring this one up as well, because I have to, even though we've been having our back and forth with Hebrew, saying Dylan Cease is not an ace. A guy with a career 3.75 ERA is not who I consider an ace. I hit on this on yesterday's show. He's made every start since 2020. This team has needed innings badly. He makes sense for this team. He's also a strikeout guy, has great stuff. I believe he's projected this year to have the most strikeouts in Major League Baseball at the moment, by projections at 220. So again, your opinion is your opinion. That is fine. But I do think that Dylan Cease has earned the right to be in the upper echelon of guys to be considered aces. And me and John have spoken on this show prior, saying how that word ace is something that we, sadly have to really stop saying, because there are more aces on the shelf than there are aces on the field because of the volatility of the position.
Some people might say this is, semantics, splitting hairs, whatever. There's a difference to me between an ace and a number one. An ace is prime Jacob deGrom. An ace is prime Max Scherzer, prime Clayton Kershaw, prime Justin Verlander, prime Randy Johnson, prime Pedro Martinez. The list goes on and on and on. You want to go back, Tom Seaver, Bob Gibson, blah, blah, blah. Those are aces. The Mets don't have an ace. We understand that. But you can make the argument the Mets don't really have a true number one. And I think for the Mets, there's no question that Dylan Cease, with his strikeout stuff and the potential and the upside, he would be their number one. He would slot into the top of their rotation. So you want to call it semantics, you want to call it splitting hairs, whatever. That's undisputable. Now, do I think King is a little bit more attractive? I do, but I think King is going to be harder to get, even though they say they're still shopping him, even with the deal he signed. But it seems like King signed a very friendly deal with San Diego to go back to a place where he can pitch in a pitcher's ballpark, where he had a tremendous amount of success, where he can hope to duplicate that again and then opt out of the second year of the deal and go and get a big free agent contract. Now, I still think that King is a little bit more attractive, Ibby, because, again, you don't have to deal with Boris. He's a guy that maybe you could get here and he would like it, and maybe you can extend him. So, and I think that there is a little bit of I don't want to say higher upside, but I don't know. Last year was the best we've ever seen of Michael King. It was also the first time that he's ever been a full-time starter. So with Cease, you get a little bit more of a known quantity as to what he is. But with Michael King, you get a little bit more of like, well, he hasn't pitched that many innings because he hasn't been a starter his whole career. And, maybe last year was the first year of many where he really breaks out. So I don't think you can go wrong either way, but I do think it's important to, understand whether it's the vernacular that we use on this show, but to also understand the thought process of where we're coming from, because also to sit here and say, what's the point of giving up a ton of prospects for a guy Stearns will not extend because of his age? Now, look, if you're a guy, I said this yesterday, if you're a guy who doesn't want to give up prospects because you don't believe in rentals, well, that's your prerogative. If you're a guy who acknowledges that Stearns probably wouldn't give a long-term deal to a pitcher who is 30 years old because that has not been the appetite that he's had, and that makes you not want to give up prospects, I understand that. But at some point, guys, you got to push some of these chips into the middle of the table. And like somebody said earlier, the Mets Paul Revere said it, the Mets are going to need to make trades. You really think that Jet Williams and Luis Angel Acuna and Ronnie Mauricio are all going to be good? You really think that they're all going to be on this team? You really think Drew Gilbert is also going to be good? Like, the odds of them all being good and all being on this team are slim to none. I talked yesterday about how you effectively, with Lindor on your team, maybe in the prime of his career, you can't keep Jet Williams and Luis Angel Acuna on your team. You cannot have a full-time 5'6" center fielder in Major League Baseball. It's just not a prospect of success. So pick who you want. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're right. Maybe somebody likes Acuna better. Maybe somebody likes Williams better. Someone's going to be wrong. Somebody's going to be right, whatever. But you're going to have to make deals. And sometimes you have to give to get. And again, going back to the kind of deal that you'd have to give the Padres, they also want pieces that can slot onto their team right now. You're looking at a Jose Butto or a Tyler McGill. Now, they're not going to headline the deal, but those are the kinds of players that you're looking at. You're looking at a guy that they can play right now, not just future prospects. This team still has a ton of money invested into players that aren't going anywhere. Jake Cronenworth and Xander Bogaerts and Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado aren't going anywhere. They have a top-heavy roster, but they're a roster that can still compete. They don't want a guy who's 7 years away, 5 years away. They want some players who are knocking on the door.
I'm going to bring up this comment real quick because I am curious. Zero Cool saying that Cease is not an all-in talent. Sorry. My question to you, Zero, is then who do you think, based off of this farm system, I'm going to be very curious on your answer here, who do you think you can get with the talent you have in this farm system, and who are you willing to give up? I'm very curious on the response on that one because Dylan Cease is a pitcher that can help you win. But also 2 weeks ago when John asked me if I thought, we had Matt Searle on the show, asked me if I thought Michael King was an ace, I responded by saying I do think Michael King is the guy that I would want. So I don't want to make it seem like I don't like Michael King either, because I do. And I echoed a lot of the stuff that John just said before about why I wanted King over Cease, but I'm not going to be upset if the deal that I said yesterday actually did come to fruition and I traded Acuna, Butto, and Gilbert for Cease. I don't care if it's 1 year because I would get a strong pitcher and it would help my team this year. So again, it's the talking out of both sides of the mouth for Mets fans where it's like, I tell you to be patient because it's not all about 25, but then I say, but I'm also willing to trade guys to help for 25, but then people say they don't want to give that up because it's too much. But I thought you wanted to win in 25. Like it's very convoluted with the way people think. It really
listen,
is.
I hate to evoke this guy's name, but the goal is to do what Brody Van Wagenen said. Now, he didn't do it, and I don't think he was ever capable of doing it, but it's to win now and win in the future. When you sign Juan Soto, you take the Mets window, which was rapidly closing before it was ever opened, because all of their top-level talent was 30 years old and either not under contract or just 30 years old, and obviously eventually you're going to start to see decline. Alonso wasn't re-signed. Minaya wasn't re-signed. Then you've got Senga, who's under contract. He's 30. Lindor, he's 30. Nimmo, he's 30. Diaz, he's 30. So their window was closing before it was ever open. When you take Soto and you sign him to 15 years at 26 years old, you take a sledgehammer to the window, you open up the side of the house. Now you've got a guy who's great right now that can help you today, but he can also help you for the future. So, these weird don't go all in moves, or this is not an all in talent. It's a little subjective, because we can debate the merits of Cease's career and where his numbers are. We could debate the merits of where his talent, his stuff actually lies. But is he not an important piece to a team that was in the NLCS last year, that is looking to build off of that had to Zero's point, had a top 4 lineup for basically the entire season? From June on, the Mets were a top 4 lineup in baseball. They were a top 10 lineup even with the slow start. Even with no career years from players, they add Juan Soto now. They go out and they build the best bullpen that we've had in recent memory. They have a very good depth in the starting pitching. So wouldn't a talent like Cease be the kind of guy that you say, you know what? I might have to push some chips in, because this team could win a World Series. And if the difference is I got to get a little closer to the Phillies pitching staff and I got to get a little closer to the Dodgers pitching staff, I'm never going to eclipse them. They have too much talent, but we have to add more. To me, isn't that the goal? I just don't get the thought. I don't get it.
I don't get a lot of things, man. I feel like I'm talking in circles at this point when it comes to, because it's repeating a lot of stuff that I said yesterday, and I don't want to bore people that were here for both. But
I'm disappointed that this is where the show has gone. I'm disappointed that I'm dumbfounded that I have to bring up arguments that I made 6 and 7 weeks ago to justify the fact that, like, I want the Mets to be good. Like, come on. Yeah, there's the other great Brody Van Wagenen line. Flew it to the top.
Jesus Christ. I don't need any more Brody Van Wagenen talk.
Let's address these 2 questions really quick, and then let's get out of here.
And then, of course, we'll do it real quick. We'll do our lineup.
Our lineup. Yeah, we'll do this. We'll do the other question. Maybe grab a couple quick comments, and then we'll do our lineups. GSD says, who bats 4th if it's a lefty? I assume if it's a lefty on the mound. I don't think the Mets are going to be doing a lot of moving around and tinkering with their lineup with regards to who bats where. I think the only thing you're going to see is almost a straight platoon as far as the DH is concerned. To go back to the show yesterday, you can listen to Ryan Finkelstein's Locked on Mets from, I think, last week some point. He talked about the platoon numbers between Jesse Winker and Starling Marte, and how that's a really solid platoon based on how they exploit the opposite-handed pitcher. But I don't think it's going to matter if there's a lefty, because I think you're either going to see some kind, we'll get into our lineups, but, Pete Alonso's either going to hit 4th, maybe Mark Vientos hits 4th, maybe Brandon Nimmo hits 4th, and I think that's kind of it. I don't see right now, the way this team is constituted, that another player besides one of those 3 is going to hit 4th, and I think they're kind of going to hit 4th regardless of who's pitching.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say that the top 4, the only back and forth that you would really see potentially would be at the 3-4 spots with Vientos and Alonso. And if things go south for like a Vientos, if he struggles a little bit, maybe you see Nimmo pop up a little bit there. But I'm more of the inkling of Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Nimmo. That's where I am when it comes to that. Look, I think that you can see some different things, like things switched up from here and there, depending on matchups when it comes to pitchers and numbers, wanting to get guys up more times than not. But regardless, I think the number one thing that you are going to see, and I know some people don't agree with it. I know CP, I don't know if he's still here. I know CP wasn't a big fan of it. He wants Soto to that 3rd. I think you're going to see Lindor, Soto as the 1-2. That's what I think.
I think so. And just to clarify, GSD said no, they meant batting, and then followed it up with something like Lindor, Soto, Alonso, lefty.
Okay.
I think you could see that
You could see that
I think
at
you
some
could
point.
see
You could
Lindor,
see Nimmo.
Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos. I also
You
think
could.
you could see Lindor, less likely, but I think you could see Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Nimmo, Alonso. I think that's less likely, but I think you could see that. It's not exactly how I would do it. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit before we end the show. This one from Milo says, what do you guys think the 26-man roster looks like at this point? Who ends up taking those bench spots and which pitchers make it into the rotation bullpen? Only so much space for all the guys we have. This goes back to what I was saying before, Ibby. There is a roster crunch here.
There is.
As far as the regular, like the position player lineup, it's basically set. There's one spot up for grabs.
Yeah.
You've got Alonso. And again, I don't like some of these players in some of these spots, but it is what it is. Alonso plays first base. I think McNeil is going to get the shot to be the second baseman, at least semi-regularly, mostly regularly. He'll probably play the outfield a bit, and then you'll get another guy to kind of slot into second base at times. But Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Vientos, Alvarez. Then you go to the outfield. It's going to be Nimmo, Siri, Soto. So that means your bench is automatically going to feature Luis Torrens. He's your backup catcher. Okay. Your fourth outfielder is
Tyrod
Taylor, right? You've got Winker and Marte, who are going to platoon at DH. And, I'm sure you can use Winker in the outfield sometimes, Marte in the outfield sometimes. I think it's less likely now that Winker plays any first base now that Pete's back, but whatever. And that leaves you with one spot on the bench. And right now, I think it's an open competition, but I think when it's all said and done, if they make no other moves, it's probably going to go to Luis Angel Acuna. We can talk about the pitching side in a second, but I think that's it.
I think
one spot.
I don't think I would disagree with anything that you just. I think we're in lockstep right there. It's the one spot, and yeah, as of today, February 6th, I would say it's Luis Angel Acuna. How things happen, we saw how crazy guys get hot. Like Zach Short makes the roster last year. Like little things like that. Can someone get hot and they promote them instead and keep someone back? Always possible, but as of right now, I would agree with everything that you just said, because if I wrote everything down, I would probably have the exact same thing from the offensive and defensive standpoint. Yes.
Yeah. And also look, the way it's set up, there is no backup shortstop on this team unless they carry Luis Angel Acuna. So, Joe DeMayo on the Mets pod said he would rather see them sign a guy like Iglesias because, and I think Carson echoed this too, saying, that you'd rather have a guy like Acuna who's still young playing every day, or mostly every day, whether it be at second or it be second in the major leagues for the Mets or in AAA. And I do think there's some truth to that. I just don't know that you can, I don't know that you could re-sign Iglesias. I don't think that's enough justification. I like what I saw from Acuna, and I think eventually if he battles his way through, you could see him, get himself more of a role. And look, Ant Rivera, Subway to Shea, we will see Joey Meneses and Nick Madrigal at some point this season. That's for sure. And I forgot about Madrigal. Madrigal could be your guy. He's not really a backup shortstop, but he could be your backup infielder if you wanted to send, Acuna down and let him play every day at AAA. I don't think that's great because Nick Madrigal is not a shortstop. So you're going to just bank on Lindor playing every day again, which I think as he gets older is kind of foolish. So, I think giving him a couple of days off here and there and days to DH is probably the thing you really need to do with Lindor and with Soto and with Pete. You want to give them a little bit of half days off here and there. And I'm not sure that you can afford to do that and play Nick Madrigal at shortstop.
Yeah, not exactly the thing I want to see, but it wouldn't shock me if it did happen. Like I said, to the vein of that of Zach Short last year, which was a great story, but like it didn't work out, and then they cut bait relatively quickly. But that wouldn't shock me. But I would much rather have the athletic ability. God forbid something happens of a player of that ilk of a Acuna. But I can also hear we want to make sure he's playing every day. We want him to stay ready, like things like that. I can definitely hear. And they choose to keep a guy that's more used to being a bench role type of player and being able to thrive in a spot like that. But right now, I would still say I would say it's Acuna. in that last
Yeah, and on the pitching side, to bring up Milo Mitchell's comment back again about as far as the 26-man roster looks, on the pitching side, there's still, again, not a lot of open spots for grabs. If you look at the fact that Manaea, Senga, David Robertson,
David Peterson.
Jesus Christ, David Peterson,
Peterson.
Manaea, Senga, David Peterson, Frankie Montas, Clay Holmes. Those are your starting five.
Okay.
I think at times they'll go to a 6-man rotation, but I think the way the bullpen shakes up, at least right now, I think there's a good chance that like that 6th spot goes to a spot starter like a Griffin Canning who's in your bullpen, or a Jose Butto who's in your bullpen, or maybe even a Paul Blackburn who's in your bullpen. I think they can alleviate some of that by starting Blackburn on the IL. I said that to start the show, or at some point in the show yesterday. They can put him on the shelf to start the season. But then in the bullpen, you've got Diaz, you've got Minter, you've got Stanek. They all need to be there. Who am I missing? I'm just doing this off the top of my head, so I apologize.
So we got those 3. You assume Sean Reed Foley. I think he'll be in there.
Sean Reed Foley doesn't have any options, so he's going to have to be. Reed Garrett.
Reed Garrett's going to be there.
Daniel Nunez, who does have options,
Nunez.
but I think he's got to be on the team unless he has an abysmal spring.
And I'm banking on him having a big year. So Nunez is there. And I remember when SNY posted it, they had Brazoban in there. Like, I know he's going to have some issues with getting to camp on time and visa things that Craig Mish had mentioned coming over from Miami. It's always been a thing for him. So I'm not 100% sure if Brazoban's going to have a spot in this pen, but that's what SNY had posted. So maybe it's him potentially. Maybe we see some more things pan out during the spring.
I don't think I'm going to have to hard disagree. I know it's not your point.
Yeah,
I got to disagree because Brazoban still has options. Guys who have options right now on this
True.
Mets team are the ones who are in trouble if from a pitching standpoint. As far as the position players go, we just walked through everybody. It doesn't really matter because they have a spot up for grabs.
Yeah.
So unless they signed Jose Iglesias to a guaranteed deal, the guys with options, they're going to be in the mix. Brett Beatty and Mauricio to a lesser extent, because I think he needs to start in AAA with the injury. Acuna, even Jet Williams, I don't think is a real chance to break camp because of all the injuries last year. But those guys are all going to have a shot. On the pitching side, Jose Butto's out of options. So if you don't trade him, he's on the team. Sean Reed Foley's out of options. So if you don't trade him, he's on the team.
Right.
These guys need to be there. So, Daniel Nunez does have options, but he was too good last year. He's going to have a big year. You're not trying to send him down. I think even Reed Garrett has options. You're going to send down Reed Garrett to keep who? It doesn't make sense. So, I think that's the one thing you have to be aware of. And that's also why I think, maybe it's not a trade for Dylan Cease or Michael King, but maybe a lesser trade happens because they just have to get somebody off the 40-man roster.
Yeah.
Or off the 26-man roster, as it were, because they're just out of options. I could see that. And I could see, honestly, Butto probably having the most value in that kind of deal. Because even a guy like Tyler McGill, look, I'd rather have Butto on this team than McGill, but McGill still has an option left. Right. So you can stash McGill. You can't stash Butto anymore. That ship sailed. Yeah. So, but the bottom line is, to answer Milo's question as thoroughly as we did, it boils down to this, Ibby. There's really not a lot of spots open on this team right now.
There's not. And I see, like Andre saying here, that he's surprised they brought Reed Foley back. Look, we always talk about stuff on here. Reed Foley's got good stuff, man.
He's got good stuff.
If he stayed, I know it's always an if he can stay healthy, but the stuff, it's there.
Yeah,
and there's a reason why they keep bringing him back, because they're like, can we get this guy to stay healthy? Because it makes sense to have him in your pen and being able to pull him out sometimes in the 6th or 7th inning, like in a big spot. Like, that's a guy that you want on the mound. Like, I want him to stay healthy because I do think he can provide something.
And look, I agree with that. And you also have to remember, when you talk about these options and stuff, if he's not healthy, you put him on the IL, then he's no longer taking up a roster spot. And so you need some of these other people. So you can't just let guys go for nothing. Not saying that you're advocating for that, but it's just it's the roster crunch part of it that is not an exciting part of running a baseball team. I do love this from Diddy Baby Oil. I'd rather have Marte at DH than McNeil at second. Yes, that's true. Marte will be a good platoon partner for Jesse Winker. If you look at their numbers together and their splits, I think that's a very successful DH for 1 year. You can figure out what you're going to do in 2026 in 2026 or in the offseason this year, this coming year. To me, McNeil would be the guy I'd rather trade off the team than Marte, but I don't think either guy is tradable. From Andre saying, remember, Acuna can play center field. If Siri can't hit, Acuna could slot in. I know what I said before, Ibby, about short guys playing center field. I don't think that's going to be a long-term solution, but I do think Andre is onto something here with regards to if Acuna has the bench spot, Acuna can probably get more so than anybody else, with the exception of maybe Jet Williams, who, again, I don't think the Mets deem is ready because of all the injuries last year. But Acuna can get a lot of at-bats playing second, playing shortstop, maybe playing some third, maybe, I don't know, and also playing center field. So I think he's the guy who has a bit of an inside track, and I'm not just going off of the 12 electric games he played last year. I think his defensive ability, his defensive versatility, and his ability to add a speed element helps him try to get that last spot on the roster.
I want him, if he's here and not dealt in like a cease thing, like at the last second, if he is here, I just want him to have such an electric spring that they have to start him and you put McNeil on the bench. Like I'm just praying for that. It's probably not going to happen, but I'm really hoping that it does, because I like the way that the lineup looks a lot better if he's in it as opposed to McNeil. But
yeah,
people are still going to complain, or not complain. People are still going to put out the idea like, oh, well, imagine if McNeil becomes a 300 hitter again. Like,
he's not.
Yeah, that'd be nice, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Diddy Baby Oil saying McNeil is worth like $70 million in sucking. I wonder, is that Carson's second account? Jesus, are you guys best friends right now? Ibby, you mentioned you starred this one from Danny Dom, who I think is a new commenter. Welcome to the show. Are the Mets good enough to take the National League East with the roster they have now? I think.
Yeah.
Oh, go. You go first.
No, I was just gonna say that I know that's been a hot topic amongst the talking heads over the last 24 hours. I think that they can. But I'm not going to sit here and say that it is a foregone conclusion. I think that the offense can really provide and carry this team. I think the pitching can definitely do enough, but at the same time, I still have respect for those other teams. And as always, I say you got to go out there and do. And the Mets did a fantastic job after the first 2 months of the season last year. They've gotten better, in my opinion. You add Juan Soto. I love what the bullpen has become, and I still like the upside of the starters. So I think a lot is there that it can come to fruition and it can happen. But I also fully believe that the Braves and Phils are going to be right there. And I think it's going to be a dogfight. I really do. I think this is going to be the toughest division in baseball. And I think these three teams all have the talent to make noise in October. And whoever wins this division is going to really have to earn it. Because like I said before, look, the Marlins are going to be terrible. We know
Brutal.
that. But the Nats are going to be an annoying Nat. And they're going to be a tough out because they're a young, hungry team that have a lot of good guys on the come up. It's going to be tough sledding in this division. I think the Mets can, but I still have a lot of respect for the Braves. I hate them, but I have a lot of respect for them. And I do think that the Mets can finish above the Phils. I do, as they get a little bit longer in the tooth. But either way, it's going to be tough. Can they? Yes. Will they? I'm not 100% sure just yet.
Yeah. I don't, you said it so well. I don't need to add anything because I just agree with you. The one thing I will say, I do not believe that you need to win a division. It's cool to win a division. It's great to be
the dance, man.
Yeah. It's great to start the season in April or the end of March and, just be a buzzsaw and be a terrific team, win the division. You clinch the division in like September and you just like walk to the playoff. That's cool. It's fun. It's exciting. You beat up on teams. It's great, but it doesn't matter. We've seen the Mets do that before and get bounced. Obviously when they won 101 games, Braves did come up and get them at the end. They did not win the division that year. And people are still going to argue that that's the reason why they didn't make it further in the playoffs. I disagree. I think it didn't really matter. I think the Mets were a little bit of a paper tiger as far as built for the postseason was concerned. So, but we've seen the Mets be the best team and win the division. We saw the Mets do that in 06. The Mets were a great team in 06. They were one of, if not the best team in baseball in 06. And they lost to a team that still to this day has the record for the worst record of a team to ever win the World Series in the St. Louis Cardinals, who made it in as a wild card. So listen, just get in. So do I think the Mets can? I think the Mets can compete for the division. I don't know that they have enough to objectively take the division, but I just don't care. It's cool. Yeah. But you know what? Hang a division banner is great. I'd rather hang a World Series banner.
Agreed. And then we got Carson coming in saying the obvious: Braves are going to be back. Do not take 2024 seriously at all. I think they will have bounce backs. I think Matt Olson's going to have a complete season. Yeah. I think Austin Riley bounces back big. They always figure things out when it comes to their pitching. Spencer Strider is going to be back. He seems to be ahead of schedule. They still got Chris Sale. I think they're going to be okay and back near the top of the NL. And Chris, shout out to Chris for actually being able to be here live. Always sending love, saying that the Phils got that rotation of arms, though. Look, I respect the Phils, I do, but when I look at some things, I can poke holes if I want to. I love Zach Wheeler, I always have. I think he's the best pitcher in baseball. I think he's fantastic. Aaron Nola, as he gets a little bit older, I have my questions about him. Christopher Sanchez, can he do it again? I could poke holes in that. Ranger Suarez had an awful second half. Jesus Luzardo, everyone wanted him. Everyone thought he's this big thing. I was a Jesus Luzardo guy. Then he really hurt his back. How's he going to be able to bounce back from that? Taijuan Walker, non-factor in my opinion. So there's a lot of holes that one can poke in. And like everyone wants to poke holes in the Mets rotation. I just poked a bunch of holes in the Phils rotation. But people like the Phils more because they have more established names. But there's still plenty of age when it comes to that rotation and question marks in terms of injuries. So I can poke holes in it too.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Jump into a couple comments here. Andrew F saying the rotation is the only true question mark on this team. I think that's fair. I think Cool, like I said before, mentioned that the Mets were, a top 4 offense for the bulk of the season, no worse than a top 10 offense at any point, even with the slow start. And he also noted that there was no career years. They added Juan Soto. This is a very good lineup. It's a very deep lineup. I think their bench is good. I think Luis Torrens is as good as you could get as a backup catcher. And I think their bullpen is going to be better, Ibby, definitely than it was to start the season last year. But I think their bullpen as currently constituted right now is better than their bullpen was even after David Stearns rebuilt it at the trade deadline. This is 100%. The deepest Mets bullpen we have seen in a very long time. Truman Quinn saying Mets are young, hungry, and rich. Young, hungry, and rich. That is going to be the title of my debut rap album. We got, speaking of rap, Diddy Baby Oil. I still hate the Cardinals from 06. Yes, that is one of the worst moments of my baseball fandom life. I was catatonic when the Mets lost that series. I did not believe that it was over. So I'm going to pose this question to the chat, and I will pose the question to Ibby. Then I will give my answer. So the Mets now have Pete Alonso, barring some kind of unforeseen move or some last-minute move to bring in a starting pitcher, or maybe less likely to go out and, add a guy like Jose Iglesias. I don't think they're doing that. I think the Mets position player pool is set to start the year. So with that said, Ibby, want to see your lineup. We don't make a big thing about lineups, daily lineups. We don't. But it is fun to construct a lineup conceptually and also see where people place certain importance. Some people are more old school. They like a traditional cleanup hitter, like a traditional leadoff hitter, whatever. Some people are more analytics based. I tend to be, and I think you tend to be, a little bit of like a in-between kind of thing where like I can get behind a little bit of both depending on the personnel that the team has. So now that the Mets for the first time really with this Pete Alonso edition have a set team heading into spring training, I want to hear from everybody who wants to offer their lineups in the comments. But Ibby, what is your starting lineup for the New York Mets?
My starting lineup, batting first, playing shortstop is Francisco Lindor. Batting second, playing right field is Juan Soto. Batting third, playing third is Mark Vientos. Batting fourth, playing first base is Pete Alonso. Batting fifth, playing left field, hopefully, is Brandon Nimmo. Batting sixth at the DH is whoever's pitching that day would be a Winker Marte spot, DH. Batting seventh is our catcher, who's going to have a big bounce back year if those numbers in September are going to tell us anything, that being Francisco Alvarez. Batting eighth, the electric man that is full of aura, as Carson likes to put it, in center, that being Jose Siri, and batting ninth, our second baseman. And I'm not putting Jeff McNeil in my lineup. I'm putting Luis Angel Acuna at second base.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, so I did not think about it with the concept of starting Luis Angel Acuna. I would like to start Luis Angel Acuna. And if that's the case, you and I would have the exact same lineup. Carlos Ramos threw out his lineup: Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Winker, Nimmo, Alvarez, Siri, Acuna, which is the same lineup you just echoed.
He switched Winker and Nimmo. That was the one.
He switched Winker and thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for catching that. I did not think about it in terms of having Acuna start, simply because I just don't think the Mets are going to start Acuna. I don't
think.
Do it. Yeah, no, listen, which is taking it in a different direction. Because in my mind, in my mind, Jeff McNeil's not on the team, so they kind of have to start Acuna and you just roll with it. Mine doesn't differ from you much. Obviously, it's Lindor 1, playing shortstop. Then in the 2-hole, we have Soto playing right field. In the 3-hole, it's Vientos at third base. In the 4-hole, it's Alonso at first base. In the 5-hole, we have Nimmo playing left field. Then hitting 6th, we have Marte or Winker at DH. 7th, we have Alvarez catching. 8th, I have McNeil at second base. 9th, I have Jose Siri in center field. And with McNeil playing, I want Siri and some of the stuff that he brings hitting 9th. I just like the speed aspect more than I like McNeil there. I just want McNeil in a deader spot in the lineup. You could flip-flop those guys. I don't really care. The one caveat I will say is, Ibby, I would like to get to a point this season. Somebody said this in the chat earlier. I forgot who it was, and it's too much chat to scroll back through, about how, Alvarez is an important piece. And I think Keith, shout out to Shea and Sons, tweeted Alvarez is the key. Mm-hmm. I would like to see a situation where Alvarez is hitting 5th or 6th in this lineup. I would like Alvarez to be hitting for power. I would like Alvarez to be driving in runs. And I would like to see a situation where you force the Mets' hand to push him up either into the 6th spot or maybe even into the 5 spot. Because I think if he's hitting that well, that means that the lineup is really clicking. So that's what I would like to see. Also, I would like to see, some semblance of getting Acuna regular starts at second base over Jeff McNeil, but I think we'll probably see that eventually. So you and I are pretty much, in the same place in regards to this lineup. A lot of people sort of, echoing that. Couple people, like Truman Quinn saying Vientos killed it in the 2 spot. That is very true.
There are times I do want to see Vientos bat second. I would love to see if they want to mix it up from here and there and say we want to go Lindor, Vientos, Soto. Like, I'm not going to say no to that. Like, I would love to see what he could do with Soto behind him. Like, that'd be kind of cool. And maybe we see it at some point.
Yeah. And look, I think Soto, I would hit Soto second, but I think Soto could hit third. Like, to your point,
get him the most at bats. That's what I want.
Yeah, that's the thing. So
get him the most at bats.
Am I going to be upset if the Mets go Lindor, Vientos, Soto, Alonso, let's say, for like most of the time, not in your estimation, some of the time? If they go that way most of the time, am I going to be upset? I'm not, but I just think when you have 2 guys, look, Soto is a top 3 hitter in baseball.
Depending on who you ask, I would even go higher, but yeah.
Sure. And the only people you could argue that are better than him are Judge and Ohtani, right? Those are the only people who are in the category.
Yeah.
So he's a top 3 hitter in baseball. I think overall player in baseball, I think Lindor is a top 10 player in baseball. He's definitely top 15 overall player.
The numbers are very interesting over the last 3 years between Lindor and Soto. They are.
I want more clarification on that in a second. But my point is this. If you have 2 guys like that on your team, Lindor and Soto, they should be getting more at-bats than anybody else. That's just how it is. Especially if you're not square peg round holing it to do so. And to that point, I mean, Lindor excels in the 1 hole and Soto excels in the 2 hole. And modern baseball says you put your best hitter in the 2-hole. So you're not even bucking trends by doing that. You're going into every bit of current wisdom, conventional wisdom. Like, it just makes sense. So I want those guys having the most at bats. Well, you get that information on Lindor and Soto. Andre saying, my lineup is Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Nimmo, Alvarez, Marte or Winker, McNeil, and then Siri. Carson, Lindor, Soto, Nimmo, Alonso, Vientos, Winker, Alvarez, Satan, which is Jeff McNeil, Siri. Odd villain, Lindor, Vientos, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, Alvarez, Winker, Siri, Acuna. GSD, Lindor, Soto have to be 1 and 2. Lindor was a monster. Who else would bat 2 in this lineup? Yeah, I think Vientos sometimes, to your point, but really I think that's the best fit. And then Brad, Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Vientos, Nimmo, McNeil, Marte, Winker, Alvarez, Siri, Taylor, with Mauricio taking McNeil's spot. It's not crazy. It's not crazy. I just wouldn't hit McNeil that high because I just think that he's doesn't deserve it. You know, if he prove it and then you put him wherever. I don't care. You know, you want to hit 320 again? Great. You know, like I love what's the thing you have on Lindor and Soto?
I'm going to say that in 1 second. The one thing I just wanted to echo when you were talking about Francisco Alvarez before and how I alluded to when I was talking about him about that September that he had. Remember, everyone, tore his UCL on his thumb, missed 2 months in 24. September, he had 70 plate appearances. His slash line was 254, 357, 542 with 5 homers. He had a 93 mile an hour average exit velocity and 11% barrel with an 86.5% zone contact. He just turned 23. I think he can get right. I think the health is there. I think hopefully that September can carry over. I think he is the key, as Keith has put it, and I think he can really stabilize the back half of that lineup from a power perspective, which would be great in turning things over. And the thing that I had that I thought was interesting that was sent to me from my friend Killa Kelb, who was in the chat yesterday. We were talking after the show, and he sent it to me, and I thought it was very interesting. Look, we all know that WAR isn't everything, but the last 3 seasons, 22, 23, and 24, the WAR of Juan Soto is 18.9. The WAR of Francisco Lindor is 18.5. Games are nearly identical. Plate appearances are nearly identical. Hits, Lindor has more hits, 492 to 449. Home runs, Soto takes it, but it's close, 103 to 90. More RBIs, more stolen bags for Lindor, though they're somewhat close, not so much the stolen bags. And then, of course, Soto takes batting average, OBP, slugging, OPS, and OPS plus, but the numbers are closer than you think in a majority of those areas. So the main thing I'm getting at is we both love Francisco Lindor. I'm very hesitant when people automatically think he is like this, like he's this no doubt Robin. It's like, this guy is fucking good, man. And he has been, and people need to realize it. It just, I think it's because they get lost in stuff like Gold Gloves and the All-Star game and stuff like that. It's like, it's more than that. He's been fantastic, and those numbers show it, because when he's able to match up with the likes of Juan Soto, that's pretty fucking good.
It is. And look, obviously Lindor is always going to be valued at a different level because he plays an elite level premium position, the most premium position on the field. And you have Soto, who is a, negative defender in a less premium position. But it is interesting to see those numbers kind of laid out the way that you did. Ibby, I think you're looking more like it's the Justice League. It's Batman and Superman. It's not Batman and Robin with Lindor and Soto. I think that's how you for the comic book heads out there. That's where you have to go with regards to this. I'm going to bring this comment up just because I don't want to be discouraging to anything. Andre saying, by the way, do you guys think Mauricio can learn to play center field? This is more of a question for like next week, the week after, as we start to get into spring training. But I want to encourage these kinds of questions as a thought process from people in the chat that we could start to talk about and have a little bit of fun. Short answer, Andre, I don't think so.
Neither do I.
I don't think he took well to left field, which means he can't play center field. I think if he's on this team, he's either a second baseman or a third baseman. I think he's going to hit. I think he's a poor man's Ellie De La Cruz. I don't think he's anywhere near as electric as that, but I think that's the kind of skill set that he brings with the power and speed combo. I'd love to have him on this team. I'd love to have him bounce back from that knee injury in a big way, but I don't think he's ever going to be a center fielder. Interesting because he does have the height, that you'd want and maybe some of the athletic ability, but I don't think that's the case. Ibby, let's end on this one. We'll get out of here on this. From Carlos Ramos, I can see Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso, Nimmo, Alvarez, and Siri all hitting 20-plus home runs this season. Now, obviously, for some of those guys, you'd want more than, you'd want 30-plus.
Right.
But I don't think that's crazy.
It's not crazy at all. And I know Joe.
Some people are going to say Siri, no, but Siri has that kind of power.
He does. It's not going to be pretty majority of the time, but he does have the power to do it. Could definitely hit 16, 17, 18 home runs. Maybe, yeah, he could definitely hit 20.
Didn't he hit
New York
26
Mets
2 years ago?
Is that what it was? Or 24, something like that? I think you're right. The New York Mets have never had two batters? Two batters break 30 home runs, or is it three? Okay, I'm trying to remember what the stat was that Joe DeMayo was talking about.
It's got to be three because Lindor and Alonso did it 2 years ago. Okay,
so the Mets have never had three batters hit more than 30 homers in a season. And they were saying that, when you look at projections right now, they would have three in Soto, Alonso, and Vientos. Now, Lindor was close, coming off of 30 home run seasons of previous two. So it's not out of the ordinary for this team to have four guys hit 30 home runs in a season, which would be incredible. And it's definitely possible. But I'll save predictions like that stuff for later on. But the comment in general, I do think that it is definitely possible for that many people to have 20-plus home runs.
Yes. I think to take this one step further, I think there's a real shot that the Mets could have four players hit over 30 home runs. And I think the Mets could have potentially three players hit over 40 home runs. That might sound insane, but I could see a situation where Lindor, Soto, Vientos, Alonso all hit over 30. And I could see a situation where some combination of Alonso, Vientos, and Soto get over 40.
That'd be nice.
Listen, Alonso, we know can do it. Alonso has done it basically every year except last year. Vientos was on a 40 home run pace. If you take what he did from his call up through the playoffs and you extrapolate that over a 162 game season, he was on a 42 home run pace. Now I know pace isn't everything, but I think it's possible. And I think when you look at Soto, he had 40 home runs last year. Now I know he's playing in a different ballpark, different approach maybe, but his approach is his approach. So I could see that. And listen, there's some naysayers here that's saying, Siri won't hit 20 home runs. Siri hit 18 home runs last year, and he hit 25 home runs the year before. He sells out for power like an absolute, it's not going to be pretty. You're right. He's going to strike out a ton, but he sells out for power. And I think that will, show you that he can do it. He can get there. Truman saying he won't play every day regarding Siri. And I think he's going to play more often than you think, Ibby, because I know Tyrone Taylor is a very, very, very good center fielder, but I don't know, man. Siri's an incredible center fielder. He's an electric center fielder. He's like prime Juan Lagar. He's incredidy. He's better than Harrison Bader.
I think he was plus 16 when it comes to defensive run saved. And he had 8, I think it was 8 going towards right field, which is great to protect Juan Soto, which is why they wanted him. I think all things considered, I think he can definitely provide some power, but we all know what he's here for his glove. Sell out for said power while you're batting 8th. I don't care. That's fine. If he hits 20, it's fantastic. If he hits 15, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And if things don't go proper for him, he's in a pretty good platoon if it has to be with Tyrone Taylor.
Yeah, would they get 12 home runs out of Harrison Bader last year?
Something
I believe.
like that, yeah.
And then Tyrone Taylor hit, let's see. Tyrone Taylor hit 7. So 19 home runs out of center field, essentially. I think the Mets will get more than that because I think Siri can do that by himself. And then Tyrone Taylor is going to give you some extra pop here and there. So yeah, Ibby, look, let's get out of here. We had a longer show than we thought we'd have, but it was a good show. Appreciate all the comments. Everybody, jumping in, hitting us with all this good stuff to keep the conversation moving. Even Hebrew Hammer, who I guess was Chazin, he said, different point, had been subscribed for a long time as Chazin. Hebrew Hammer came out swinging.
Chazin hasn't been here in a while, that name.
Well, it's Hebrew Hammer, apparently.
Okay.
I don't think that they're here anymore with us right now in the chat. But listen, it's just it was a little aggressive coming at us. So we responded in kind with a little bit of aggressiveness coming back. So it'd be anything we didn't get to, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Nothing else that I want to say. I'm just ecstatic that this nonsense is over and now we can start, hammering spring training, pitchers and catchers, looking ahead about what this team can do, focusing on guys playing in shorts, which is always going to, it's going to run its course relatively quickly. But I'd rather much talk about that than the black cloud of contracts and things of that nature. So I'm pumped up that is done. We are close. We are near Mets baseball returning, and that's fantastic. And I can't wait to talk more and in depth about some other things, do a little bit more digging. And of course, the guest list is going to start to climb a little bit more as we try and put some feelers out for some people to join us on the show to have some fun. So as always, thank you for joining us on a Thursday. Shout out to the 520 plus people that are here with us. And let's go Mets.
I just want to bring up this comment from Zero Cool. You're definitely not in the doghouse. We agreed on some things, disagreed on some other stuff. Always bringing good stuff. The only thing I will add is if you missed any of the show, you can watch it as soon as we're done with the broadcast here in a couple seconds on the same YouTube channel called Till Mets Do Us Part. Subscribe, turn notifications on so you never miss an opportunity to know, especially when we do this extra show when we're going live. Also, if you subscribe, you can take part in the live chat. If you can't do any of that, this will drop tomorrow morning as an audio podcast, wherever it is you get your podcast. And yes, you can also, like David, you can watch over on Twitter. It says, thanks, guys. Great show. Thrilled to have Pete back. Thanks for joining into the commentary over on Twitter. And I will just end it in Pete's way. LFG.